Abort! I don't want this baby, the wealthy man told his young mistress, throwing money at her. 20 years later, a lawyer appeared, looking just like him. The city sparkled under the sunset lights as limousines and luxury cars paraded in front of the majestic Royale Hotel. It was the night of the annual charity gala, hosted by Evans Corp, the most anticipated event for the elite of society. Guests adorned in haute couture dresses and immaculate suits entered the main hall, a space decorated with crystal chandeliers and lush floral arrangements. Robert Evans, the mogul behind the business empire, moved elegantly among the attendees. His imposing stature and cold gaze commanded both respect and admiration. Beside him, his wife Sarah wore a stunning red dress, smiling with calculated perfection as she shook hands and offered cordial greetings. Although they walked together, an intangible distance separated them, evident to those observing beyond the surface. In a quieter corner of the hall, Emily Carter nervously adjusted the strap of her simple navy blue dress. At 22, she had never attended such a grand event. A law student at the local university and a volunteer at a non-profit organization, she had received an invitation for her dedication to community service. Her green eyes scanned the room, both awed and overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding her. "First time at a gala like this?" a male voice asked beside her. Emily turned in surprise and found a kind-looking man, though he was a stranger to her. "Is it that obvious?" she replied with a shy smile. "Just a little," he chuckled. "I'm James. I work for one of the partner organizations." "Nice to meet you, James. I'm Emily." The conversation flowed easily, easing some of Emily's initial discomfort. However, as they spoke, she felt a gaze fixed on her. Looking up, her eyes met those of Robert Evans, who was watching her from across the hall. There was something in his gaze that made her feel both exposed and curiously intrigued. "It seems you've caught the host's attention," James commented, noticing the direction of her stare. "Who exactly is he?" Emily asked, trying to sound casual. "Don't you know? That's Robert Evans, the owner of this place and much more. He's one of the most powerful men in the city." Before she could respond, Robert began to approach. James, sensing the shift, politely excused himself and stepped away. "Good evening," Robert greeted with a deep voice. "I see you're enjoying the event." "Yes, it's truly impressive," Emily replied, trying to maintain her composure. "I don't recall seeing you at previous years. Are you new to these circles?" She smiled modestly. "Actually, this is my first time. I was invited because of my work with the Hope Foundation." "Ah, a dedicated collaborator. I greatly appreciate the work you do," Robert said, though he knew little about the Foundation's activities. A comfortable silence settled between them as the music filled the air. "Would you like to take a walk?" he suggested. "I can show you some artwork that isn't on display for everyone." Emily hesitated for a moment. There was something captivating about him, a blend of mystery and authority that drew her in. "Sure, I'd love to," she finally accepted. They walked together down a hallway, adorned with exclusive paintings and sculptures. Robert shared stories about each piece, displaying knowledge that pleasantly surprised Emily. "You have exquisite taste in art," she remarked. "Art is one of the few things that can transcend time and words," he replied, stopping in front of a painting depicting a sunset landscape. Emily studied the painting and then looked at Robert. "Sometimes, I feel people can be like that too, leaving a mark beyond their time." He gazed at her intently. "Do you think we're all capable of that?" "If we desire it enough and act accordingly, yes," she affirmed confidently. Robert smiled slightly. "You have an interesting perspective, Emily." The use of her name caught her off guard. She didn't remember telling him. Still, she chose not to mention it. They continued walking until they reached a terrace that offered a panoramic view of the city. The lights sparkled like fallen stars, and the cool night air enveloped them. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It is," he replied, but his eyes were fixed on her. Emily felt his gaze and turned toward him. The tension between them was palpable. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. "I should head back to the hall," she said, breaking the spell. "Of course," Robert nodded, though a part of him didn't want her to leave. They returned together, and upon arrival, Sarah approached Robert with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "There you are. Guests are asking for you," she said, casting a scrutinizing glance at Emily. "I was showing Miss Carter some of our private pieces," he explained without flinching. "How considerate of you," Sarah replied with a hint of irony. "Pleasure to meet you, dear." Emily felt the chill behind the words. "Likewise, Mrs. Evans. And if you'll excuse me, I need to attend to some matters," Robert said, walking away with Sarah. Emily watched them go, feeling an odd sense of loss. The night continued, but she no longer felt as comfortable as before. She decided it was time to leave. While she waited for her coat at the cloakroom, a familiar voice startled her. "Are you leaving already?" It was Robert, back at her side. "Yes, it's been a lovely evening, but I have to get up early tomorrow," she lied slightly. "Let me offer you a car to take you home." "No need, thank you. I can take a taxi." "I insist," he said firmly. "I won't allow a lady to walk alone at this hour." Emily smiled, resigned. "Okay, thank you." The ride was quiet. Robert accompanied her to the car, and before she got in, he took her hand. "I hope to see you again, Emily." She looked into his eyes. "Me too." The car drove away, and Robert stood on the curb, feeling an odd unease. He had met many women, but none had left him feeling this intrigued. He returned to the hotel, but the night no longer seemed so bright. Emily arrived at her modest apartment and lay back on her bed, replaying the events of the night. There was something about Robert Evans that attracted and scared her at the same time. She decided she needed to be cautious. After all, their worlds were too different. However, fate had already laid out its plans, and that chance encounter would be the beginning of a story that would intertwine their lives in unimaginable ways. Sunlight timidly filtered through the curtains of Emily's modest room, illuminating the law notes and books scattered across her desk. Several weeks had passed since the charity gala, and although her days were filled with classes and work, her mind often drifted back to that night and the subsequent meetings with Robert Evans. After that first encounter, Robert had persistently sought out Emily. Invitations to elegant dinners, strolls through exclusive art galleries, and conversations that stretched into the early hours of the morning became part of their routine. Emily found herself immersed in a world she had only imagined before, but more than the luxury, it was Robert's company that drew her in. She discovered an intelligent and charming man, capable of showing a more human and vulnerable side that contrasted with his public image. One afternoon, while walking through a secluded park, Emily dared to ask, "Robert, why did you seek me out after the gala?" He looked at her thoughtfully before responding, "There's something about you that intrigues me. You're different from anyone I've ever met. With you, I can be myself." Emily smiled, feeling her heart race. However, a shadow of doubt crept in. "But our worlds are so different." "Worlds can come together if we want them to," he replied, taking her hand. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and what began as mutual attraction blossomed into a passionate romance. Emily felt as if she were living a dream, but there was always an invisible barrier. Robert avoided discussing his personal life beyond superficialities and never mentioned his wife. Aware of his status, Emily decided not to press, fearing that any question could shatter the delicate balance they had created. But dreams sometimes collide with reality. A month later, Emily began to feel strange, morning sickness, constant fatigue, and an intuition she couldn't ignore. She decided to take a pregnancy test. Upon seeing the positive result, a wave of emotions overwhelmed her: joy, fear, uncertainty. She thought of Robert and how he would react to the news. She resolved to tell him as soon as possible. She arranged to meet him at a discreet cafe, away from prying eyes. Robert arrived looking sharp as always, but with an expression of impatience. "Is something wrong? You sounded worried in your message," he said, taking a seat. Emily took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Robert, there's something I need to tell you. I'm pregnant." A heavy silence settled between them. Robert stared at her, and for a moment she thought she saw concern in his eyes. But quickly, his expression hardened. "That can't be," he said coldly. "It is. I took the test. You're the father," she replied, feeling tears threatening to spill. He looked away, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "This complicates things, Emily. It can't happen. I have an image to maintain, a business, a family." The word family resonated painfully with Emily. "Family?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Are you married?" Robert sighed. "Yes, but our marriage is complicated. It's not what you think." "And what do I think, Robert? You hid something so important from me. You made me believe that—" "It doesn't matter now," he interrupted, pulling a check from his wallet. "We can resolve this. Here, it's enough for you to handle the situation." Emily looked at the check in disbelief, feeling indignation and pain swirling inside her. "Do you think money can fix everything?" she said, her voice breaking. "This is our child, Robert." "I can't have a child outside of marriage." "It would be a scandal," he replied, avoiding her gaze. She stood up slowly, feeling a mix of sadness and determination. "I'm not going to handle anything. I'm going to have this baby, with or without your support." Robert finally looked at her, but his expression was cold. "Then you leave me no choice. I can't be involved. It's better we stay away from each other." Emily felt her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. "Is that it?" she whispered. "After everything we shared?" "It's for the best for both of us," he concluded, rising and leaving the check on the table. "Take care, Emily." Without another word, Robert left the cafe, leaving Emily engulfed in overwhelming solitude. Tears finally rolled down her cheeks. She took the check and ripped it into small pieces, letting them fall like fragments of a shattered dream. The following days were tough. Emily faced a harsh reality. She was alone, expecting a child, and without support. She decided to temporarily leave university to work and save money. She found a job as an assistant at a local bookstore where the hours were long, but the atmosphere was welcoming. One afternoon, while organizing some books, James, the young man she had met at the gala, walked into the store. "Emily!" he exclaimed upon recognizing her. "It's been a while." She forced a smile. "Hi, James. Yes, it has been some time. I've been looking for you. After the gala, you disappeared. Is everything okay?" Emily hesitated before responding. "I've been busy with personal matters." James noticed the sadness in her eyes. "If you need to talk, I'm here," he offered sincerely. "Thank you, but I'm fine," she replied, even though she appreciated the gesture. Months passed, and Emily's pregnancy progressed. Although she faced financial difficulties, she found support in those who valued her strength. The bookstore owner, Mrs. Thompson, became a motherly figure, offering advice and help when Emily needed it most. One night, while closing the store, Emily felt a sharp pain. Worried, she decided to go to the hospital. There, she was informed that she needed to rest to avoid complications. With no close family, she felt more alone than ever. The next day, Mrs. Thompson visited her in her small apartment. "You should have called me," she said affectionately. "You can't go through this alone." Emily smiled weakly. "I didn't want to bother you." "Nonsense. From now on, I'll be here for whatever you need." Mrs. Thompson's generosity touched Emily. Even though Robert had abandoned her, she discovered that kindness still existed in the world. Meanwhile, Robert tried to carry on with his life, but a persistent unease haunted him. He struggled to concentrate on his business, but memories of Emily and his decision tormented him. Sarah noticed his distraction and, suspecting something was amiss, began to inquire. One night, during a tense dinner, Sarah finally confronted Robert. "Is there something I should know?" she asked, fixing her gaze on him. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, avoiding her eyes. "Don't lie to me. I've noticed how you've been lately. Is there another woman?" Robert sighed. "It's nothing you need to worry about. Just business matters." Sarah gave a cold smile. "You know our union is strategic, Robert. As long as it doesn't affect our image, you can do what you want. But I won't tolerate surprises that jeopardize what we've built." He nodded, though inside he felt increasingly empty. Months continued to pass. Emily gave birth to a healthy baby boy she named Michael. Holding him in her arms for the first time, she felt that all the pain and struggles had been worth it. She promised to protect him and give him all the love she had never received. Emily and Michael's life wasn't easy, but together they found happiness in the little things. Emily resumed her studies online, determined to become a lawyer someday. She knew she would face challenges, but with Michael by her side, nothing seemed impossible. Robert, for his part, buried himself even deeper in his work, trying to silence the voice of conscience that reminded him of his abandonment. However, a part of him knew he had lost something invaluable, even if he refused to admit it. Fate had drawn divergent paths for Emily and Robert, but the decisions made during those critical moments would have repercussions felt years later when their lives inevitably crossed again. The morning sun filtered through the worn curtains of Emily's small apartment, softly illuminating her face. Beside her, in an improvised crib, little Michael slept peacefully. Every time she looked at him, she felt an indescribable mix of love and a determination she had never experienced before. She knew that despite the challenges, she had made the right choice in bringing him into the world. Life as a single mother wasn't easy. The savings she had quickly dwindled with medical expenses and the basic needs of the baby. Determined to provide for her son, Emily began searching for work. Long hours and a lack of experience made opportunities scarce. Finally, she secured a part-time job as a waitress at a small cafe in the neighborhood, where the pay was modest, but enough to cover the essentials. One morning, while serving regular customers, Mrs. Thompson, the owner of the bookstore next door, came in looking for coffee to go. "Good morning, Emily," she greeted warmly. "How's little Michael doing?" Emily smiled. "He's growing fast. He barely lets me sleep at night anymore." Mrs. Thompson laughed. "That's how they are at that age. Listen, I was thinking, I need help at the bookstore. Someone to organize the shelves and assist customers when I'm not there. I know you're working here, but I could offer you flexible hours, and you could bring Michael if you need to." Emily felt a wave of gratitude. "That would be wonderful. I really appreciate it." "Then it's decided. You can start tomorrow." With this new opportunity, Emily could better balance her time and care for Michael without neglecting her work responsibilities. The bookstore became a refuge for both of them. Among books and stories, Emily found space to dream again of resuming her studies and providing a better future for her son. One afternoon, while organizing some volumes on the top shelf, a book fell to the floor, catching the attention of a customer who had just entered. "Let me help you," the man said, picking up the book. "Thank you," Emily replied, turning to find James, the young man she had met at the gala, who had reappeared months earlier at the cafe. "Emily, what a surprise to see you here," he smiled. "I work here now. Are you looking for something special?" "Actually, I was just strolling, but it seems destiny keeps bringing us together." She smiled shyly. "It does seem that way." James became interested in her situation and over time grew into a close friend. He often stopped by the bookstore to chat and occasionally help with Michael. His presence was a relief on difficult days, and Emily appreciated having someone she could trust. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Robert Evans continued to immerse himself in his world of business and endless meetings. However, a persistent unease loomed over him that he couldn't shake. Despite his efforts to forget her, memories of Emily and the decision he had made haunted him during moments of solitude. Sarah noticed his growing distance, but chose to ignore it, focusing on her own ambitions and social commitments. One day, during a meeting with his board of directors, Robert received an urgent call that interrupted the session. "Mr. Evans, it's about the project on the West Coast. We need your final approval," his assistant informed him. "Proceed as planned," he replied impatiently, ending the call quickly. Hanging up, he felt a pang of dissatisfaction. Everything seemed to lose its meaning. The achievements that once filled him with pride now left him with an inexplicable emptiness. Back at the bookstore, Emily was closing up for the night when James appeared at the door. "Did I arrive too late to buy a book?" he asked with a smile. "There's always time for a good book," she replied, opening the door for him. As they browsed the shelves, James observed her with concern. "You look tired. Is everything okay?" Emily sighed. "It's been a long few days. Michael has been sick, and I'm a little worried." "Have you considered going back to university? You're one of the smartest people I know. It would be a shame for you not to finish your studies." "I've thought about it, but with Michael and work, I don't know how I could manage it." James pondered for a moment. "Maybe I can help. I know some people at the university. We could find a way for you to take some classes online or part-time." Emily's eyes lit up. "Would you do that for me?" "Of course. You're my friend, and I believe in you." With James's support and Mrs. Thompson's encouragement, Emily decided to resume her studies. Enrolling back in university restored a part of herself that she had lost. Although the days were exhausting, juggling work, classes, and caring for Michael, she felt like she was moving toward a better future. One night, after putting Michael to bed, Emily sat at her small kitchen table, surrounded by books and notes. The silence of the night was only interrupted by the soft sound of her son's breathing. As she reviewed her notes, she reflected on everything that had happened over the past few years. Despite the challenges, she was building a life for both of them. However, she couldn't help but think of Robert from time to time. She wondered if he ever felt remorse, or if Michael meant anything to him. But she quickly dismissed those thoughts, focusing on what truly mattered. Years passed, and Michael grew up surrounded by his mother's love and the support of the small community they had formed. He proved to be an intelligent and curious child, always asking about the world around him. One day, while Emily and Michael were walking through the park, he asked, "Mom, why don't I have a dad?" The question took her by surprise. She had anticipated this moment, but didn't know how to address it. "Well, sweetheart, some families are different, but that doesn't mean they're any less special." Michael looked at her with his bright eyes. "Will I ever meet him?" Emily felt a lump in her throat. "I don't know, honey, but I want you to know that you have many people who love you." He nodded, although he seemed thoughtful. Meanwhile, James had become an important figure in their lives. He often joined them on outings to the park or for home-cooked dinners. His relationship with Emily had strengthened, and although deep feelings existed between them, both seemed hesitant to take the next step. One afternoon, after a presentation at the university where Emily had excelled, James invited her to celebrate. "You deserve it. You've worked so hard to get here," he said, as they toasted with glasses of wine at a small local restaurant. "I couldn't have done it without your help," she replied sincerely. James took her hand across the table. "Emily, there's something I've wanted to tell you for a while." She looked at him expectantly. "I know you've been through a lot, and I admire your strength. I care about you deeply, and I'd like to be by your side, not just as a friend." Emily felt a mix of emotions. She knew James was a wonderful man and that his feelings were genuine. "James, I feel something for you too, but there are parts of my past that I haven't overcome yet." "You don't have to tell me anything now. I just wanted you to know," he said, smiling warmly. The future seemed brighter than ever. Emily was about to graduate, Michael was a happy and healthy boy, and the possibility of new love loomed on the horizon. However, in the shadows, the past began to stir. Robert, in an attempt to fill the void in his life, decided to get involved in new philanthropic projects. During a visit to a community center, he saw a mural painted by neighborhood children. Among the images, one signature caught his eye: Michael C. Something about that name seemed familiar, but he couldn't pinpoint why. The feeling unsettled him, but he chose to ignore it. Back in his office, Sarah entered without knocking. "We need to talk," she said firmly. "What now?" Robert replied, weary of her constant demands. "I've decided I want a formal separation. Our arrangement has run its course." Robert looked at her, surprised. "What are you talking about?" "We both know this marriage is a sham. I've found opportunities that suit me better, and I don't want to be tied to you." Although their relationship had always been more of a contract than a marriage, the news caught him off guard. "Do what you want," he finally said, turning his attention back to the papers on his desk. Sarah smiled coldly. "I always do." With her departure, Robert found himself lonelier than ever. The walls of his office seemed to close in on him. Without family, without true friends, and with a hollow life despite all his material success. That night, sitting in his luxurious but lonely penthouse, Robert poured himself a glass of whiskey and looked out the windows overlooking the city. Memories of Emily came flooding back. He wondered what had become of her and the son he had rejected. For the first time, he allowed regret to penetrate his armor. Somewhere in the city, Emily was getting ready for bed, reading a story to Michael. Their lives, although separate, were more connected than either of them imagined. Destiny began to chart the paths that would unite them once again, this time through Michael, whose promising future was about to intertwine with the past his mother had left behind. The midday sun illuminated the university campus, where young students rushed from one class to another. Among them stood Michael, now an 18-year-old, tall and self-assured. His kind smile and bright eyes reflected a determination that set him apart from his peers. He had earned a full scholarship to law school, a testament to his hard work and dedication. Meanwhile, Emily watched proudly as her son pursued the dream she once had to abandon. Although the years had been difficult, their relationship had grown stronger. However, she noticed a growing unease in Michael over time. His questions about his father had become more frequent, and Emily knew she couldn't avoid the topic much longer. One afternoon, returning home, Michael found Emily in the kitchen preparing dinner. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked, dropping his backpack on the table. Emily felt a knot in her stomach, anticipating what was to come. "Of course, sweetheart. Is something wrong?" Michael sat down, staring at his hands. "I know you've always avoided talking about my dad, but I need to know who he is. Not just for me, but to understand where I come from." Emily sighed and took a seat across from him. "Michael, I never wanted to hide the truth to hurt you. I just wanted to protect you." "Protect me from what?" "I have the right to know, Mom." She nodded slowly. "You're right. It's time you know the truth." In a soft but firm voice, Emily told him everything. From how she met Robert Evans, their brief romance, to his cold reaction upon learning about her pregnancy. Michael listened in silence, his emotions fluctuating between disbelief and anger. "Robert Evans? The mogul?" he finally asked, astonished. "Yes, he is your father," Emily confirmed, her eyes filled with sadness. Michael stood abruptly, pacing back and forth. "All this time, he abandoned us. He left you to raise me while he lived in luxury." "I know, and I understand how you feel. But I don't want this revelation to consume you." "I can't just ignore it, Mom. I need to confront him." Emily looked at him with concern. "Be careful, Michael. Robert is a powerful man. I don't want you to get hurt." "I'm an adult now. I can handle it," he replied firmly. In the following days, Michael began to research more about Robert. He used his university connections and his ability to access public information. He uncovered details about his father's businesses, his influence in the city, and, most importantly, the shadows lurking behind his pristine image. Meanwhile, Robert continued to immerse himself in his business. His recent divorce from Sarah had gone unnoticed by the public, thanks to a quiet agreement that protected both their reputations. However, he was starting to feel isolated. The nights in his luxurious penthouse were lonely, and although he wouldn't admit it, something inside him longed for a deeper connection. One day, during a business conference at the university, Robert was invited as the keynote speaker. Michael saw this as an opportunity to get closer. He attended the event, blending in with the crowd of students and professors. In the auditorium, Robert spoke about success, leadership, and business vision. His charisma captivated the audience, but to Michael, every word sounded hollow. He felt a mix of admiration and resentment toward the man standing before him. At the end of the conference, a question and answer session was organized. Michael raised his hand, and upon being selected, he stood up. "Mr. Evans, thank you for your inspiring talk. My question is, what advice would you give to someone seeking success who comes from a life of hardship and without the resources you had?" Robert looked at him, noticing something familiar about the young man. Success doesn't only depend on resources, but on determination and effort. If you have a clear goal and work hard, you can overcome any obstacle. Michael nodded slowly. And what if those obstacles are the result of others' actions? How does one deal with injustice to move forward? The question seemed to make Robert slightly uncomfortable. Life isn't always fair, but focusing on the past doesn't help. You must look forward and create your own path. Michael held his gaze. "Thank you for your advice." After the event, as Robert headed to his car, Michael waited for him at the back exit. "Mr. Evans," he called, approaching. Robert stopped, looking at him with curiosity. "Do you need something else?" "I just wanted to thank you personally for your time. Your story is inspiring." "It's a pleasure. What's your name?" "Michael. Michael Carter." The surname meant nothing to Robert, but he felt that strange familiarity again. "Nice surname. Are you studying business?" "Law, actually. I want to make a difference in the legal system." "A noble career. I wish you success." "Thank you. I hope our paths cross again." Robert nodded and walked away, but the conversation left an impression on him. Back in his office, he couldn't shake the young man he had just met from his mind. He decided to look up his name in the university records. Upon reviewing his file, he noted that he was an outstanding student, awarded a scholarship for academic merit. Meanwhile, Michael shared the experience with Emily. "I saw him, Mom. I talked to him." She looked at him worriedly. "And how did you feel?" "Confused. It's strange to see him in person after everything you've told me. He doesn't know who I am, but I feel like I need to get closer." "Michael, be careful. I don't want you to get hurt." "I know, but I feel it's something I have to do." In the following days, Michael began frequenting places associated with Robert, trying to learn more about him and his environment. That's how he met Jessica Miller, a young journalist investigating corporate corruption cases. They met at a cafe near the Evans Corpio's offices. "Excuse me, are you Michael Carter?" she asked, approaching his table. He looked up, surprised. "Yes, that's me. Do we know each other?" "I'm Jessica Miller. I've read some of your articles in the university magazine. You have an interesting perspective on legal ethics." "Thanks. Can I help you with something?" "Actually, yes. I'm investigating some irregularities in companies around the city, and I think you could provide me with valuable information." Michael saw an opportunity. "Are you referring to companies like Evans Corp?" Jessica smiled. "Exactly. Are you interested?" "I might be. What do you have in mind?" They met several times, sharing information and establishing a partnership based on common goals. Both wanted to expose the truth behind corporate facades and seek justice. Meanwhile, Robert began to notice strange movements in his company. Missing reports, employees asking uncomfortable questions. His instincts told him something was brewing. One night, he decided to personally review the security records. When he watched the footage, he recognized Michael entering the building, accompanied by Jessica. "What is that young man doing here?" he wondered aloud. He contacted his head of security. "I need you to investigate a student named Michael Carter. I want to know everything about him." The reports arrived quickly. As he reviewed the information, Robert found Emily Carter's name listed as his mother. His heart skipped a beat. Memories of Emily flooded back, and he began to connect the dots. "It can't be," he murmured. The possibility that Michael was his son overwhelmed him. Feelings of guilt, fear, and confusion intertwined. He decided he needed to confront Emily. He located her address and, without warning, showed up at her door. Emily opened it, surprised to see him. "Robert, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you. It's urgent." She hesitated, but finally let him in. "What's this about?" "It's about Michael. Is he my son?" Emily felt the world stop. "Why are you asking this now? It's been nearly 20 years. I need to know the truth." She looked him straight in the eyes. "Yes, Robert, Michael is your son." Silence filled the room. Robert sank into a chair, processing the information. "He has been reaching out to me. I met him at the university. Did you know that?" "He told me. He wants to meet you, but he's also hurt by what you did." "Emily, I made a mistake. I can't change the past, but I want to make amends." "Make amends? After all this time, do you think it's that simple?" "No, I know it isn't, but I want to try." At that moment, the door opened, and Michael walked in, surprised to see Robert. "What are you doing here?" he asked defiantly. Robert slowly stood up. "Michael, I needed to talk to you. I now know you are my son." Michael looked at him coldly. "And what? Are you here to offer me money to disappear, like you did with my mother?" "No. I want to know you, understand you. I know I've failed, but I want to do things right." "It's too late for that," Michael replied, stepping back. "I don't need anything from you." Emily interjected. "Michael, please, listen to him." "Why should I? He abandoned us. He left us alone. He doesn't deserve our consideration." Robert felt the weight of his actions more than ever. "You're right to be angry. I just ask for a chance to show you that I can be better." Michael stared at him. "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I can't ignore who you are either." The tension was palpable. Emily watched them both, hoping they could find a way to reconcile. "We could start by talking," Robert suggested. "Just a conversation, no expectations." Michael hesitated. "Okay, but it'll be on my terms." "Whatever you decide," Robert agreed. With that fragile truce, the lives of father and son began to intertwine. However, Michael's intentions were more complex. As he approached Robert, he continued to work with Jessica to expose the corruptions within his company. The shadows of the past were stretching long, and the path to redemption was filled with obstacles. The decisions they made in the coming days would define not only their relationship, but also the fate of everyone involved. Autumn had painted the city streets in warm shades of orange and red. Leaves fell gently, creating natural carpets that crunched under the feet of passers-by. Michael walked across the university campus, lost in thought. It had been a year since he discovered the truth about his father, Robert Evans. Although their relationship remained tense and distant, Michael had decided to focus on his studies and caring for his mother, Emily, who had been struggling with a silent illness. Emily had hidden her physical decline to avoid worrying her son. The long hours of work and the sacrifices she had made over the years had taken a toll on her health. She suffered from a heart condition that, although manageable with treatment, had worsened due to a lack of resources and proper medical attention. Emily always prioritized Michael's needs over her own, postponing her medical appointments. One afternoon, while Michael was in class, Emily fainted at the bookstore where she worked. Mrs. Thompson, concerned, called an ambulance and immediately notified Michael. Upon receiving the call, he felt a chill run through his body. He rushed to the hospital, where he found Emily in a bed, connected to monitors and looking frail in a way he had never seen before. "Mum, what happened?" he asked, his voice trembling as he took her hand. Emily gave a weak smile. "It was just a dizziness, sweetheart. Don't worry." But Michael could see in her eyes that it was more than that. The doctor approached and explained the situation. "Your mother has been experiencing heart failure. She needs treatment and possibly surgery." Michael felt the world crumble around him. "We will do whatever is necessary. What are the options?" The doctor sighed. "The treatment is costly and time is of the essence. We need to act quickly." The following days were a whirlwind of medical consultations and financial concerns. Michael searched for all possible options to fund Emily's treatment. He reached out to assistance programs, charities, and considered applying for student loans. One night, while sitting in the hospital waiting room, Jessica Miller approached him. "I heard about your mother. I'm so sorry," she said empathetically. Michael looked up, his eyes reflecting exhaustion and desperation. "I don't know what to do, Jess. I need to find a way to help her." She sat down beside him. "Maybe you should consider talking to Robert. He has the means to help." Michael shook his head. "I don't want anything from him. After how he abandoned us, I can't ask for his help." "But it's your mother's life that's at stake. Sometimes we have to set our pride aside." Michael reflected on her words. He knew she was right, but approaching Robert was a difficult decision. Ultimately, determined to do anything for Emily, Michael went to the Evans Corporation's offices. Upon arrival, the imposing glass building reflected the city like a cold, impersonal mirror. He approached the reception desk. "Good afternoon. I'm here to see Mr. Robert Evans." The receptionist looked at him skeptically. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's an urgent matter. Tell him it's Michael Carter." After a few minutes of waiting and several phone calls, he was finally allowed to go up. In the luxurious office, Robert greeted him with surprise. "Michael, this is unexpected. What brings you here?" Michael took a deep breath. "I need your help. My mother is seriously ill. She requires urgent heart surgery, and I don't have the means to pay for it." Robert observed him in silence. There was something in his son's desperation that stirred a forgotten fiber within him. "I understand. I will make the necessary arrangements for her to receive the best treatment." Michael felt a mix of relief and resentment. "Thank you, but I want you to know that I'm not here for me. I'm doing this for her." "I know, and I respect your honesty." The paperwork was expedited, and Emily was transferred to a private clinic where she would receive the necessary care. However, her condition was critical. One night, Emily requested to see Michael alone. "Sweetheart, there's something I need to tell you," she said softly. "Don't talk like that, Mom. You're going to recover," he replied, trying to sound optimistic. She smiled sadly. "You've always been my strength, but there are things you need to know." She pulled out a folded letter from under her pillow. "If something happens to me, I want you to read this." Michael took the letter, feeling the symbolic weight it represented. "Nothing is going to happen to you. We'll get through this together." Emily caressed his face. "You're an incredible man. I'm so proud of you." The following days were a constant battle. Despite the medical efforts, Emily's heart was weakening. One early morning, as rain pounded against the room's windows, Emily took her last breath, with Michael holding her hand. The pain he felt was indescribable. The woman who had been his world, his guide, and his inspiration was no longer there. The funeral arrangements were made for an intimate ceremony, surrounded by close friends and co-workers from the bookstore. After the funeral, Michael sat in the park where he used to go with his mother. He remembered the letter she had given him. With trembling hands, he opened it. "Dear Michael, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you physically, but I will always be in your heart. I want you to know that my greatest happiness has been being your mother. I regret not having told you the whole truth about your father sooner. He not only abandoned you, but also took away my chance to trust again. There are things you need to know about Robert, things that may help you understand and perhaps forgive. He wasn't always the man you met. There was a time when I believed I saw goodness in him. I hope you can find in your heart the peace that I could not. I love you beyond words. With all my love, Mom." Tears streamed down Michael's face. The letter, though brief, conveyed Emily's wish for him to find reconciliation and inner peace. Determined to honor his mother's memory, Michael resolved to confront his pain and seek answers. He met with Jessica and shared everything that had happened. "I need to know more about Robert, not just as my father, but as the man he truly is." Jessica nodded. "I've been investigating more about his businesses. There are signs of corruption and illegal activities, but I'll need your help to access confidential information." Michael saw this as an opportunity to seek justice, not just for his mother, but for all those affected by Robert's actions. Meanwhile, Robert, affected by Emily's death, began to reflect on his decisions. He attended the funeral discreetly, observing from a distance. Seeing Michael devastated filled him with deep guilt. Back in his office, Robert found an old photo of himself and Emily from one of their trips. Her genuine smile contrasted with his serious expression. He remembered those moments and realized how much he had lost due to his ambition and selfishness. One night, he decided to contact Michael. "We need to talk," Robert said on the phone. "I have nothing to say to you," Michael replied coldly. "Please, I know I can't change the past, but I want to explain some things." After hesitating, Michael agreed to meet at a neutral cafe. Sitting across from each other, the initial silence was heavy. "I'm so sorry about your mother," Robert began. "She was an incredible woman." "You don't need to say that," Michael shot back. "You know her suffering was partly because of your abandonment." Robert looked down. "I know. I've made many mistakes. My ambition blinded me, and I hurt people who didn't deserve it." "And now you expect me to forgive you?" Michael asked bitterly. "I don't expect your forgiveness. I just want you to know the truth. My childhood was complicated. I grew up in an environment where power and success were all that mattered. I learned to be cold and to put my goals above everything. But when I met your mother for a moment, I felt I could be different. However, the fear of losing everything I had built made me pull away." Michael listened attentively, trying to find sincerity in Robert's words. "That doesn't justify what you did." "I know. But I want to make amends. I want to help you in whatever you need." Michael thought of his mother's letter and her desire for him to find peace. "If you really want to do something, start by taking responsibility for your actions. Many people are affected by your shady business practices." Robert was taken aback. "What do you mean?" "I know about your corrupt practices. Jessica and I have been investigating." Robert felt a mix of anger and fear. "You're playing with fire, Michael. You don't know what you're getting into." "On the contrary, I know exactly what I'm getting into, and I'm willing to see it through to the end." The conversation ended abruptly, leaving both on opposite sides. In the following days, Michael and Jessica intensified their investigation. They contacted former employees willing to testify and gathered documents incriminating Robert. However, their actions did not go unnoticed. Feeling cornered, Robert turned to Sarah, who still had influence in the business world. "I need your help," Robert said, putting aside his pride. Sarah looked at him with disdain. "Now you come to me? After everything that happened?" "It's about Michael. He's trying to destroy me. If all the information he has comes to light, we'll both be in trouble." Sarah frowned. "Both? I have nothing to do with your illegal activities." Robert smiled bitterly. "Don't play innocent. You know you're involved." She sighed. "What do you propose?" "We need to stop him. Convince him to drop his investigation." Sarah thought for a moment. "We could offer him money, an amount he can't refuse." "I don't think that will work. He's more stubborn than I thought." "Then we'll have to look for other measures." Meanwhile, Michael received an anonymous call warning him that he was in danger. Worried, he decided to be more cautious. One night, after leaving the university, he sensed he was being followed. He quickened his pace, but 2 men appeared, blocking his way. "We have a message for you," one of them said. Before he could react, they struck him, leaving him unconscious. He awoke in an alley, aching but with his determination intact. He knew he needed to act quickly. He went to the authorities with the gathered evidence. A formal investigation against Evans Corp was launched. The news exploded in the media. Robert and Sarah were summoned to testify. The company's reputation plummeted and its stock value crashed. Faced with the possibility of losing everything, Robert decided to do the right thing. At a press conference, he admitted his mistakes and announced his resignation as CEO, handing over control of the company to an independent board that would handle restructuring and repair the damage caused. Michael watched the broadcast from the room where his mother used to read him stories. He felt a mix of relief and sadness. Days later, he received a letter from Robert. "Dear Michael, I have accepted my mistakes and am willing to face the consequences. I know I can't recover the lost time or the damage done, but I hope that one day you can understand my motives and perhaps forgive me. Your mother was an exceptional woman. I regret not having lived up to her. With affection, Robert." Michael closed his eyes, letting emotions wash over him. He thought of Emily and her wish for him to find peace. He decided that, for his own well-being, he needed to let go of the hatred. He met with Robert in a park, the same one he used to visit with his mother. "I've read your letter," Michael said, sitting on a bench next to him. "Thank you for coming," Robert replied. "I don't know if I can forgive you for everything, but I'm willing to try." Robert nodded, his eyes glistening. "That's more than I deserve." Both fell into silence, watching as leaves gently fell from the trees, symbolizing the closing of one cycle and the beginning of another. Michael decided to honor Emily's memory by living a life based on integrity and compassion, just as she had taught him. He knew the road wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to move forward, carrying with him his mother's legacy and the lesson that forgiveness could be a step toward healing. After Emily's death, Michael channeled his pain into an unyielding determination to expose his father's corrupt actions. He interned at a law firm closely linked to Evans Corp, leveraging his position to access confidential information. It was there that he met Jessica Miller, an intrepid journalist dedicated to uncovering corporate scandals. One afternoon, while reviewing documents in the archive room, Michael and Jessica found contracts and communications that revealed bribes to officials and abusive labor practices abroad. The evidence was compelling, but they knew they needed more to take down Robert Evans. They decided to contact Henry Collins, a former partner of Robert's who had been betrayed and ruined years earlier. Henry, still resentful, agreed to help them and provided internal documents and testimonies that strengthened the case against Evans Corp. With each new piece of information, the magnitude of the corruption became more evident. Meanwhile, Robert began to suspect that someone within his company was leaking information. When Sarah learned about the investigation, she joined him to protect her own interests. Both were willing to take drastic measures to silence any threat. One night, Michael received an anonymous call warning him that his life was in danger. Worried about the safety of Jessica and Henry, he decided to act quickly. they arranged a meeting in a safe place to plan their next steps. They knew they had to expose Robert before he could stop them. Michael, Jessica, and Henry prepared a detailed report for the authorities and the media. The tension was palpable. They were about to unleash a scandal that could not only destroy Robert Evans's empire, but also put their own lives at risk. With determination, they prepared to face the consequences, aware that the truth must come to light. Michael, Jessica, and Henry were ready to reveal the dark practices of Evans Corp. They had gathered enough evidence to initiate legal action and make a significant media impact. They decided to publish a detailed article in a reputable newspaper and present the evidence to the relevant authorities. However, their movements did not go unnoticed. Sarah, using her connections at the law firm where Michael worked, discovered he was behind the leaks. Concerned about the legal and financial implications this could have for her and Robert, she devised a plan to neutralize the threat. Using her influence, Sarah manipulated James Lawson, Michael's best friend from university and colleague at the firm. She made him believe that if Michael continued his actions, both could lose their careers and face legal consequences. Under pressure and fearing for his future, James agreed to help her. One afternoon, James approached Michael in the office. "I need to talk to you about something important," he said seriously. "Sure, what's going on?" Michael responded, unsuspecting. "I've heard rumors that you're involved in something big against Evans Corp. You need to be careful. You could get into serious trouble." Michael hesitated before responding. "I trust you, James. Yes, I'm working on something that could change a lot, but it's for a good cause." James nodded, hiding his unease. "I just want you to be sure of what you're doing." That night, James delivered copies of the documents Michael had kept in the office to Sarah. With this information, Sarah and Robert could anticipate Michael's moves and prepare to counter the accusations. The next day, as Michael and Jessica were about to present their evidence, they received a legal notification, a cease and desist order for defamation and intellectual property theft. Surprised, they realized someone had betrayed them. "How could they find out about us so quickly?" Jessica asked, frustrated. Michael pondered. "Someone must have accessed my files at the office. But who?" The answer came sooner than expected. James, consumed by guilt, confessed to Michael what he had done. "I'm so sorry. They pressured me, and I feared losing everything I've worked for," he said, tears in his eyes. Michael felt a mix of anger and disappointment. "I trusted you. We were like brothers." "I know, and there's no excuse for what I did. I just hope you can forgive me someday." Refusing to be defeated, Michael and Jessica sought alternatives. They decided to contact a prosecutor willing to listen to their case. They presented the evidence and explained the situation, emphasizing the urgency of acting before Robert and Sarah could hide more evidence. Meanwhile, at Evans Corp's, tensions between Robert and Sarah were escalating. Robert began to question Sarah's aggressive tactics and her negative influence. "This is getting out of control," Robert said. "I don't want to continue down this path." Sarah looked at him coldly. "We can't afford weaknesses now. If we don't take action, we'll lose everything." "Maybe it's already too late. I don't want to sink deeper into this pit." Disillusioned by Robert's attitude, Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands. She planned to divert funds from the company to offshore accounts and disappear before everything collapsed. However, her plans were discovered by auditors who alerted the authorities. Sarah was arrested on charges of financial fraud and embezzlement. Her downfall significantly weakened Robert's position. Cornered and facing multiple investigations, he began to reconsider his priorities. In an unexpected gesture, Robert contacted Michael. "I need to talk to you. It's urgent." Michael agreed to meet in a public place. "What do you want?" Michael asked, keeping his guard up. "I know I've made many mistakes and that our actions have led us to this point. I'm willing to cooperate with the authorities and take responsibility." Michael watched him cautiously. "Why the sudden change?" "Because I've realized that continuing to fight will only cause more harm. I want to do what's right, even if it's late." With Robert's cooperation, the authorities were able to dismantle the illegal operations of Evans Corp and begin the process of restitution for the victims affected by their practices. James, seeking redemption, testified in the case and supported Michael and Jessica in their efforts. In the end, although the wounds did not heal immediately, Michael found a sense of closure. He had honored his mother's memory and contributed to justice. Though the path had been filled with obstacles and betrayals, the alliances he formed proved stronger than the adversities. The day of the final trial arrived. The courtroom was packed with journalists, curious onlookers, and those affected by Evans Corp's actions. Robert Evans, once powerful and feared, now sat in the defendant's seat, his face marked by worry and remorse. Beside him, his lawyers whispered strategies, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Michael watched from the front row alongside Jessica and Henry. They had worked tirelessly for this moment, gathering evidence and testimonies that exposed years of corruption, fraud, and abuse of power. While he felt satisfaction in seeing justice served, a part of him couldn't help but feel sadness at seeing his father in that situation. The prosecutor presented the case forcefully, detailing the illegal operations and the harm caused to countless people. Documents, financial records, and statements from former employees who had suffered under Evans Corp's practices were presented. Robert kept his gaze lowered, aware that his empire was crumbling. During a recess, Robert requested to speak with Michael privately. They met in a secluded room where the silence was heavy. "Michael," Robert began wearily, "I know I can't change the past, but I want you to know that I deeply regret all the harm I've caused." Michael stared at him. "I can't forgive what you did, but I appreciate that you're finally taking responsibility." Robert nodded slowly. "You're a better man than I ever was. Your mother would be proud." Michael felt a lump in his throat at the thought of Emily. "I'm trying to honor her memory by doing what's right." The trial concluded with a guilty verdict on all charges. Robert was sentenced to several years in prison, and his assets were confiscated to compensate the victims. Sarah, feeling cornered by the investigations, fled the country to avoid facing justice. With the Evans Corpus empire in ruins, Michael was offered the chance to take control and rebuild the company. However, he chose to decline the offer. "I don't want to continue the legacy of corruption my father left behind," he explained to the board. "It's time to close this chapter and start anew." Instead, Michael and Jessica founded a non-profit organization dedicated to promoting ethics and transparency in business. Their goal was to prevent other companies from falling into the same corrupt practices and to help those who had been harmed. James, seeking redemption, joined them in their mission. Together, they began to make a tangible difference in the business community, providing legal advice and support to socially responsible entrepreneurs. One day, while walking through the park he used to visit with his mother, Michael stopped under the tree where they had shared so many conversations. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. "We did it, Mom," he whispered to the wind. "I did the right thing." Although the path had been difficult and filled with pain, Michael found comfort in knowing he had broken the cycle of corruption and revenge. He was building a future based on the values Emily had instilled in him: integrity, compassion, and justice. Robert, from his cell, reflected on the decisions that had led to his downfall. Isolated from the world he once controlled, he realized that his true wealth was not in material possessions, but in the relationships he had neglected and lost. Michael's story became an inspiration to many, demonstrating that it is possible to overcome the past and choose a different path. Though the scars remained, he was ready to face the future with hope and determination. The spring sun illuminated the city, filling it with a warm sense of renewal. Michael walked the streets with a serene purpose, feeling that one chapter of his life had ended and another new one was beginning. After the fall of Evans Corp and Robert's imprisonment, he had dedicated the last few months to solidifying the non-profit he founded with Jessica and James. Their work was making a positive impact in the business community, promoting ethical practices and supporting entrepreneurs committed to social responsibility. One morning, while reviewing emails in his office, he received an unexpected letter. The sender was Robert Evans from the penitentiary where he was serving his sentence. Michael contemplated the envelope for a few minutes before deciding to open it. The letter was brief but sincere. "I hope this letter finds you well. I have been reflecting a lot on my actions and the consequences they have had on your life and on many others. I would like to apologize again and, if possible, I would like to see you. There are things I wish to tell you in person. With remorse, Robert." Michael sighed deeply. Though part of him was hesitant, he felt it might be time to close that chapter for good. He decided to accept the request and scheduled a visit. Upon arriving at the penitentiary, the strict security measures and austere environment contrasted sharply with the world of opulence Robert had once lived in. In the visiting room, he came face to face with his father. Robert looked older, but there was a humility in his eyes that Michael had never seen before. "Thank you for coming," Robert said, taking a seat across from him. "I received your letter. I thought it was important to hear what you had to say," Michael replied calmly. Robert nodded slowly. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about my mistakes. I wanted you to know that I'm cooperating with the authorities to repair, as much as possible, the damage caused. I've also decided to donate a significant portion of my remaining assets to charitable organizations." Michael observed him, trying to discern the sincerity in his words. "That's a good start. I know I can't recover lost time or erase the pain I caused you and your mother, but I hope that with these actions, I can at least contribute to something positive." There was a thoughtful silence before Michael spoke. "I appreciate that you're doing the right thing now. My mother always believed in the power of forgiveness and redemption." Robert offered a faint smile. "Emily was an exceptional woman. I deeply regret not having valued that at the time." Michael felt a weight lift inside him. "I've learned that holding on to resentment only prevents us from moving forward. I'm willing to leave the past behind and focus on the future." Robert's eyes glistened slightly. "That means more than you can imagine. Thank you." The conversation continued for a while, covering personal topics and sharing stories they had never had the chance to discuss before. When they said goodbye, both felt that a reconciliation, though partial, was possible. Back in the city, Michael met with Jessica and James at the headquarters of their organization. They had exciting news. They had received a grant to expand their programs and reach more underserved communities. "This is amazing," Michael said, reviewing the documents. "We'll be able to help more people start ethical and sustainable businesses." Jessica smiled with enthusiasm. "We're making a real difference. Your leadership has been key to all of this." James nodded. "Also, we've been invited to an international conference to share our work model." Michael felt a wave of satisfaction. It's a great opportunity to inspire others. That night, he decided to visit Emily's grave. The cemetery was tranquil, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the nearby trees. He knelt before the headstone and placed a bouquet of wildflowers, her favorites. "Mom, I know you can see me, and I hope you're proud. I've faced my fears and tried to do the right thing. Thank you for being my guide and my inspiration." A deep peace enveloped him. He felt that somehow Emily was there, smiling and supporting him as she always had. Over time, the organization they founded became an international reference in business ethics and social responsibility. Michael, Jessica, and James continued working together, strengthening their friendship and sharing a vision of a fairer world. One day, while walking down a busy street, they saw a group of young people peacefully protesting for environmental and social causes. Michael smiled, recognizing in them the same fervor and determination that had once driven him. "Look, the future is in good hands," Jessica commented. "It sure is," Michael replied. "Our job is to support them and pave the way." James added, "And make sure they never lose hope or integrity." Life went on. Robert, having served part of his sentence and earned good behavior, was released on parole. He decided to dedicate his days to community service and mentoring young entrepreneurs to prevent them from repeating his mistakes. Though his relationship with Michael remained distant, they kept in occasional contact. On one occasion, they met at a charity event organized by Michael's foundation. Robert approached timidly. "I see you've accomplished incredible things." "I've had a lot of support," Michael replied, "and I've learned that second chances can transform lives." Robert nodded, understanding the message. "I hope that one day we can rebuild our relationship. Time will tell. For now, I'm focused on continuing this work." They parted cordially, aware that the road to complete reconciliation would be long, but not impossible. In the end, Michael understood that despite the adversities and the pain of the past, he had found his purpose. He had turned the legacy of suffering into a source of positive change, honoring his mother's memory and building a better future for many. As the sun set on the horizon, filling the sky with golden and purple hues, Michael gazed at the city he loved so much. He was ready to face any challenge that came his way, knowing he was not alone and that his actions could make a difference. And thus, we conclude this emotional story of love, perseverance, and justice. We hope it touched your heart as much as it did ours while sharing it with you. If you enjoyed this tale and want to see more content like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Share this story with your friends and family so that together we can reflect on the power of forgiveness and the importance of fighting for what is right. We'd love to hear your comments. What did you think of the ending? What would you do in Michael's place? Stay tuned for our next video, where we'll continue bringing inspiring stories that make us think. Thank you for joining us, and until next time.